Alabama State is my team. Matter of fact, we're going to be playing them Saturday.
All right.
I'm going to be pulling for them Saturday because they don't need no help.
We need all together. Yeah.
Yeah, we need help.
All right, we'll go ahead and get going. Glad to see everybody, and glad we're sitting and fellowshipping and talking to each other with a smile, right? And enjoying each other's company already. So thanks for coming on out, making the sacrifice you made for Bible study. And tonight we're going to go back to Luke 15, but we're going to study the parable of the prodigal son, but we're going to do it a different way. We're going to study it more on an adult level, probably deeper than what we're accustomed to. So obviously then you'll see your scriptures on the screen, and you can also use your paper Bibles and things of that nature. Whichever floats your boat, as they say, right? And as you know, your questions, your comments, your suggestions are necessary and solicited as we go forward. So again, welcome to Wednesday Night Bible Class.
Right.
And hopefully you're doing good. Let's see. All right. Let's just a little slow catching up with me. All right. So again, the parable of the prodigal son. We're just going to take it a couple verses at a time or so, and we're going to break those down. So let's get somebody to read Luke 15, verse 11 and verse number 12. Luke 15, 11 and 12.
Then he said, a certain man had two sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that belongs to me. So he divided to them his livelihood.
Okay. Now again, we're starting with the beginning of the parable, right? And he said a certain man had two sons. So who is a certain man symbolized? Who is he really symbolized?
Really, they wound up being God the way it is. When you really look at it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So that's really what we're talking about. Remember, this whole chapter is about what? Saving the lost, right? We talk about the parable of the what? Lost sheep. The parable of the what? Lost coin. And he makes it even personal now, being the parable really of the what? Lost son, right? And so it's the same theme going throughout it. But again, if you notice, there's a little more detail with each parable that gives you more about the Lord's personality. How much he loves us, how much effort he'll put into saving us, how forgiving he is really what this parable is really going to be about. So as you can see, every one has a different portion of emphasis, right, about God's different parts of his personality. All right, so obviously then you want to know that. So the sons would be who? Anybody, right? The sons would be any lost soul, right? And of course, obviously then the prodigal son was everybody in this room at one point, right? You know, male or female, so all of us were the prodigal son at some portion in our lives, if not today, right? You know, obviously though, even though that you may be a saved child of God, you can also do some things to put yourself out in the far off country, right? And have to come back through repentance as well. So obviously then you always want to look at this from a personal note. Put yourself in the shoes of the prodigal son, because we have all been there. And it also helps us do what?
Keep from going back.
Keep from going back, but also what? How we view other people, right? Because obviously if we were out there and other people were out there, we also know that somebody had to have compassion on us, and we ought to in turn have compassion on other people as well. All right. Okay, very good. Very good as we kind of get warmed up then. All right, so let's look at it. Luke 15, verse 11 and verse number 12. The main emphasis then is the son asking for what? His inheritance. But if you know the rest of the story, was he able to handle the inheritance? No, because he asked for what? Too early. He was not mature enough to handle independence. He wasn't mature enough to handle money. And truth be told, he wasn't mature enough to handle women either. Which you're going to find out in this story. So obviously then, he was very naive. Like we like to say, he was still wet behind the ears, right? Only problem is wet behind the ears with money is a bad combination, right? Because they soon part from each other. All right, so obviously then, we see that the story is talking about what? The son wanted his inheritance before he could handle it, right? And of course, he actually, not just the money, he had too much freedom too early too, right? Where he wasn't able to handle it. And so obviously then, when you see this man going out there, he's going by his own knowledge, right? And his own knowledge is doing what with him?
Take him in the wrong direction.
It's felony, correct. Yes, taking him in the wrong direction, as our brother has said here today. So obviously then, he was going without any what? Parental guidance. Any true wisdom leading him. All of that was left where? Back at the Father's house, correct. The wisdom was still at the Father's house. It didn't follow him to his riotous living in the far-off country he ended up in later on in the parable there. That makes sense to you? All right. We're just making sure we got the context, and then we're going to kind of bring it to our application of today. So thinking about this now, when you go out there without true guidance and true wisdom, what are some of the pitfalls that you fall into? Now help me out, y'all, tonight. What are some of the pitfalls you fall into, especially if you're young and naive? What do you fall into? Huh? Debt. Okay. Yeah, I think I made that mistake too. Especially around the college days, early 20s and things like that, right? I don't know about you, but back in the day, credit was a lot easier to get, wasn't it? Yeah. I mean, credit cards used to come all the time in the mail. The hawks, the sharks, if you will, they hung around college campuses like it was no tomorrow, didn't they? Yeah. Trying to get the young folks to sign up and make some bad deals, which many of us did, including myself. So debt can be one, because why? You still are what? Not able to handle money. The responsibility of money. Okay? What else?
Well, I'm getting taken advantage of, you know. You take people, wind up thinking people are your friends when they're really not. They're there to take advantage of you. You know, and because of the lack of experience, I guess you fall for whatever they put before you.
Yeah, you really don't have good friend radar yet, do you? In other words, you normally go for the people that don't really mean you any good, right? When you're young and naive, you really can't see the wolves from the sheep, right? They all look alike to you at first until you get a little bit more what? Experience down the line. So obviously then, you associate with the wrong folk, right? That's one of the mistakes that you make, especially what the Bible calls those youthful lusts. The Bible calls these things. I think to Timothy or Titus, Paul wrote that too. All right. Anything else? What else happens when you go out there without guidance? True guidance or fatherly guidance. Now, you know I'm really talking about God, don't you? Right. Go ahead. Did you have your hand up?
I'm just saying you're going to drink, smoke. You just get caught up in the world when you go out there doing everything, especially if you're going out there with money. All the people who playing like they friends, they go just huddle to him because he got money and get him to do everything that they like or whatever, and get him just to do wrong.
So basically, you fall into the traps of immorality. You know, immoral living. What did the King James? Y'all remember the word? If you read ahead in the parable, what word did King James use for that? That type of lifestyle of immorality, wild living. What did he call that? Righteous. Yeah, righteous living. That's all that is. Immoral, rebellious, all about me type of mentality and lifestyle is what he engaged in. Okay? Anything else before we move forward? Good job. All right. Let's move forward then. So obviously then, I want to break some of these things down. You've already mentioned them, right? When you go out there without any wisdom, actually from the Father, which would be God in the parable, right? You make some bad decisions financially, don't you? I think Brother Desmond said that out there earlier, didn't he? See, we lose financially. You know, how many of you have ever thought and said, now that you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever the case may be, I wish I'd have known then what I know now, right? Would you have forsaken some things? You know, not spent some money on this, spent some money on that, made some better decisions that now you can be sitting back looking pretty, as they say, right? Instead of still paying for the things that you made decisions about 30 years ago? Absolutely. Absolutely. And so obviously then, we lose financially when we're not going with actually God's wisdom. Remember, we talk about Proverbs a lot. Proverbs and Psalms are God's book. I like to call them books of common sense, right? Our everyday affairs, God shares those wisdoms, right? And so obviously, where is the wisdom then? Y'all said it earlier. The wisdom is in where? The Father's house. And where has God recorded that wisdom? In the Bible itself, right? So when you depart from the Bible, aren't you also departing from what? Wisdom, right? Because you're not going to know it straight out, right? Are you born with wisdom? No, you have to be what? Taught wisdom from a what? Wise source, and you can't get any more wise than God himself, the creator of heaven and earth and all of us at the same time, right? So look at Proverbs 21, verse number 20. Obviously, then, you would say this is common sense, but not everybody is taught this in the home. Believe it or not. A lot of parents neglect even this degree of common sense being instilled in their kids, right? All right, somebody read that. Proverbs 21, verse number 20. What does God say about this type of lifestyle?
There is treasure to be desired in oil and the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man spinneth it up.
All right, so what is he doing? Basically, Proverbs is written in poetic form. You often see contrast, right? God will say one thing and then he'll contrast it with a different thought in that same verse. So you see Proverbs written like that quite a bit. Some of the Psalms are written that way. So God is talking about those that are what? Doing the right thing. He says what? There is treasure to be desired and oil in the dwelling of the wise. In other words, you'll have what you need is what he's talking about, right? But what's the contrast? But a foolish man does what? He spendeth it up, right? So even God, see, I studied economics a little bit of that in college, right? And you're always taught that what? There's limited supply all the time, right? And so you have to understand that eventually this stuff gonna run out, right? So you got to be able to live frugally enough, right? In order to take care of yourself and of course for a rainy day as these things come up, right? But the foolish man don't think like that, does he? No. Right? The foolish man does what? I want it now, and I'm going to have it now, right? And so what's going to happen when he gets older? I want it now, but I have no access to get it, right? Because why? I didn't live frugally, and I did what? Violated Proverbs 21, verse 20 says, right? And what did God call that man? A fool. A fool, right? So don't you see a lot of common sense from a biblical standpoint that the Bible gives unto us, right? So what you want to do, right, before you really start getting out there in the world, don't you want this under your belt, right? You should be taught this before you even leave mama's house, right? Before you leave daddy's house, this should already be instilled in you, okay? And of course, if you're a parent now, shouldn't you be that instilling it in them, right? So that they don't go out and make the same mistakes the prodigal son made, okay? All right, any questions or comments on that? Feel free. All right, so as you can see, the farther and farther, think about it now, the farther and farther you get away from God, the worse and worse it gets, right? Because you're dealing with your own wisdom, which really is foolishness, right? According to the Proverbs writer. All right, here's the other part that y'all didn't get into, but I'm going to get into it tonight. When you go out in the world, especially unprepared, your parents didn't have the birds and bees conversation with you, how do you find out about this topic? You find out what? The hard way. Truth is the truth, y'all. Truth is the truth. Young men, young women should be taught chastity in the house, right? But how often do we hear these things? How often do we as parents say, your virginity is a gift? Your virginity is something that should be admired and cherished, right? But see, what we're doing, we get more like the world. Well, we teach what? Safe sex. Well, but you're still giving them permission to go out and do these things, right? Honestly, truth is told, if we can be adults tonight, y'all old enough to take this conversation, aren't you? The only safe sex is no sex. Yeah, I'm just telling you the truth, right? Right? Until you get that what? That ring on your finger. Instill these things. And I like what they're doing a lot of times. I know a lot of these people don't have the truth. They call themselves Christian, but we know they really are not. But they have some good principles. Like when you see these dads and these mothers having these chastity vows with their kids, that's a good thing, right? Because they start teaching them those things, what? Early on in life, right? Then, of course, if I can be this adult with you, be that example too. Right. We definitely still can't be the type of parents or role models that say, do as I say and not as I what? Do, right? Because a kid is not silly. They know when a parent is a hypocrite, right? And a lot of times what do? They follow right in that parent's footsteps, right? Even if you have made some mistakes, you still got to come clean with them. Yeah, don't do what I did, right? This isn't the way. Somebody's got to break the chain. I wish somebody would have sat down and talked to me the same way. To keep me away from the mistakes that I'm trying to keep you from. So don't hide these things. You know, there's no shame in the game, is it? If you made some mistakes, hey, admit that thing, man, right? And try to keep your daughters away from the same things. Keep your sons away from the same things. And please, if I can stress this, especially when you got a boy child, don't have no double standards. You know, don't have the girl saying, you got to be chaste. Then the boy, go out there and sow your wild oats. That happens in our households. All the time. Boys will be boys, right? And boys can be dead for that kind of stuff, right? The boys still can turn into deadbeats, right? That boy need to learn how to be what? Somebody's husband, right? Somebody's father. Groom him to be that, right? Not the next stud, if you will, if I can use those type of words, right? That ain't good for nothing or nobody, right? But our guys, we actually groom our boys, right? Think about it. You know, if you catch a young lady, I'm being as PG as I can, right? If you catch a young lady alone with a young man, they might not be doing nothing, but a man will come in the house and have a fit. Am I telling y'all the truth? But if the boy did it, sometimes he might get a high five. That's my boy. Oh, y'all won't be real about that, right? But it's wrong. It's wrong, right? Because Christian applies to both what? Male and female.
That's right.
Equally, right? Equally. And so I had a coworker one time, and she made an awesome statement about teenage pregnancy, because she had a child, out of wedlock originally. But she said something profound. I was only 16 years old. She said that. She said, but it still takes two to make the baby, right? Why do y'all come down so hard on the girls when the boys doing the same thing, right? And she was right. She was right. All right. So any questions or comments on that? See, the thing is, again, I'm gonna get you. Let me finish this thought before I forget it. If you don't prepare your children, their human sexuality will get out of control. It will. They're gonna find out everything the hard way, right? And before you know it, then you got grandchildren you help raise them. Truth is the truth, y'all. Because why? We not having those conversations like we should before what? They leave the household and are going out in the world. Yes, sir. Go ahead, brother.
You actually pretty much said what I was going to say. Because, I have a lot of discussion like that a lot of time with my students. Especially around prom time. Because, to them it's like,
yeah,
it's that season.
Right.
And you try to tell them, hey, that ain't what prom's supposed to be about.
Right.
Y'all supposed to just go out, dance, y'all see who come down to Fort Nation, go get you something to eat. After that, you can go home.
Right.
It's not a requirement, that you try to go out and have sex, but a lot of the kids, they'll say, well, my parents already got us a room and this and this and that.
Lord have mercy.
Yeah. But, it's kind of the thing of, a lot of times parents, they forget how children are. It's that old rule, if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile.
Sure.
And, that's how kids are. And so, you definitely need to be preaching, abstinence from the onset, because of the fact that more than likely they're going to try to go a little bit further.
Absolutely.
Than, what you teach. And so if you instill abstinence in them from the onset, then they'll be a lot more reluctant to try to go the extra mile.
Let's put some deep in there then, in what you just said. Okay, you taught them abstinence, they still went out there and made a mistake. At least there's something in them that can bring them out of that mentality, right? Because when you look later on with the prodigal son, he said, I had it better in my Father's house, he came to what? His senses after he got out there. But if you don't put anything in him to combat him, he will stay in the pig pen. Right? And continue to wallow with the pigs. So at least give your kids a chance. Give them a chance to do it right. And if they don't do it right, give them a chance to get it right. Because why? You put something in them to combat all the foolishness they're going to hear out there in the world, right? That's really nothing but what the devil trying to misguide your child. Okay? All right. Any others? Feel free now. Yeah, go ahead, sis.
I was just going to say, just kind of coincide with what Desmond was saying. He's talking about from a high school perspective. Having a daughter that's 8, I'm experiencing a lot more now. Like, the stuff they talk about on the playground.
Exactly.
It's unreal.
I know.
So trying to deal with that is...
Well, see, think about this. I've seen some of it, even though I don't have my own children. My dad died when I was 28 years old, so I became the man of the house because I'm the oldest, right? And I got a sister that's 18 years younger than me. So I already know the stuff that was going on in middle school. It's like, wow, are you kidding me? We had to pull my sister out of school because it was so crazy. Seriously. Seriously.
The teenage, they know more than the grown folks.
Yeah.
Stuff that they don't even have no business. I'm like, good gracious.
Exactly. Hold on, I saw her first, and I get you.
Well, brother, no, that's something, but you said this was saying the parents already got kids at home and they tell me this, but since I've been driving the bus, you know, those kids that get on there, they talk about stuff, and you have parents that these kids swarm to because these parents buy them alcohol and buy them drugs, and one day I actually talked to one of the girls because I know her from when I was a teenager, and she said, well, I'd rather for mine to be at the house doing it with me in the street where they can get in trouble. Why is that right? You're doing wrong with them.
It ain't right because AIDS can
So
follow you
mine can't
nowhere,
come to your
anywhere.
house. Mine
Right.
can't hang with your child.
Drink. And then I've had a cousin, and when I actually went together when my cousin came home, and the kids were drinking. I said, "We don't got the alcohol. Y'all ain't even old enough to have no alcohol. And y'all in this house. Who let y'all drink?" Oh, my mama always said that she ready for me to drink at home with her. And I said, "Get out my face with that food." She just, your mama ain't got no sense.
And you said it
I said,
right.
"When you leave here," I said, "when you leave this house and you driving, okay, where you got that drink from? You still driving on the floor. You still doing wrong. What does that mean? Because you sitting in that house, you drinking." I said, "Who teaching you? They trying to be your friend
Right.
instead of being your parent."
And that's what I was saying with Lori. Basically, sin follow you everywhere. And the consequences of sin follow you everywhere. So it don't matter where you're doing it because why? It's a spiritual issue, isn't it? And the thing is that scares me about that, especially when you're letting a child drink young. The younger you let them drink, the more likely they'll become an alcoholic. I mean, the truth is the truth. You're setting them up for disaster. You really are. You really are. Let me get it real quick. Go ahead, Sister Carla, before I forget here.
Children learn what they live. I remember I was 15 and I always used to travel to Virginia to go keep my nieces and nephews while my sisters and her husband worked. Taking out the trash. I'm hearing what I know supposed to be hearing, but I'm hearing. And I look over they had what you call them, gated wood fence, privacy fence, gates, whatever. 2 kids, y'all under 10. Ooh. What the world? I'm like, what? I tried to intervene. Nosy little me. I'm like, what y'all doing? Get in the house and go do some homework. I got cussed out and told me to mind my business.
Oh, well.
And I was like, oh, okay.
I think there was 2 kids in my neighborhood, 10 and 9, had a baby. Literally. They had a child that young. So it does happen. It does happen.
We just went through that. My niece, my great niece, she's 14 now. Like, she's got a 3-month-old little boy.
Let me throw something out there now since we're adult class, watch everybody around your children. Do not leave folk alone with your kids. I don't care if they're your relatives. Be careful. Everybody's not who they seem. They are. Okay? And that's so some kids have some bad stuff happen to kids because why? We get too trusting with other adults. Even if they are relatives, bad stuff can happen. Okay? So you got to parent all the time. All the time. Okay. All right. Let's get Proverbs 29 verse 3. I think y'all got that. But remember, if you don't prepare them, they walk out there unarmed in the battle. Okay? All right, let's read that. Proverbs 29, verse number 3.
Whoso loveth wisdom rejoiceth his father, but he that keepeth company with harlots spendeth his substance.
Y'all remember the story of the prodigal son? He fits that. Literally, right? Because why? He kept company with what? Harlots. And spendeth all his what? Substance. That's how he ended up being broke without anything, right? Harlots can be translated as loose women or prostitutes. Either one, right? But there's really not much difference between a prostitute and a loose woman, are there? I mean, it's still all the same thing. A woman could be a woman could be a prostitute at home. She ain't got to walk the street to be a prostitute, right? As long as she putting herself out there for financial gain, that's still what? Prostitution. It's one way or form. It just may not be a crime. Okay? I'm talking about the immorality side of things, right? But getting back to the scripture, God says what? He whoso loveth wisdom rejoices his father. In other words, what? Makes him proud, right? Shouldn't a child that you have groomed to graduate from high school, isn't it a moment that what? When he walks or she walks across the stage, that's when you what? You're proud because you got through it, right? They made it through and didn't have children till marriage. What happens? What happens to that father? Then he's what? He's proud, right? But God says what? But he that keepeth company with harlots does what? Spendeth his substance, right? That's the easiest way to bring somebody down, right? You ever see it? What normally happens to celebrities that have money? What usually brings them down? Like male athletes, what usually bring them down? The women, right? The Delilahs end up being their lives, and what? They end up being broke or messed up in jail, all those type of things, right? So obviously these things can happen, and it can happen on the opposite spectrum, right? Especially with sisters nowadays. I don't understand y'all at all. Because I grew up under that generation. You had to look good. I mean, you had to look like you had a little something, right? You just couldn't come out there walking around looking like, thug and all that kind of. I'm from a different generation, man. If you wasn't a pretty boy, you couldn't get no women, period, man. I don't know. I don't know what the deal is now. I mean, you can look at him. He broke. Oh, they want him. I mean, what is this?
Let's stay about. That's who they want.
So you think I ain't lying here, right? I'm not lying. It's a mentality. As long as he's male, he's all right, right? So in other words, what have we failed to do? We failed to establish standards for our young ladies, right? And so what are they doing? Going by their own wisdom, right? And they're getting messed up with this human sexuality, right? All this kind of stuff, right? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Not to sound contrast, but you said for leaving without standard is more of a reverse standard, because going off of what she just said, to slightly adjust what she was saying is not just that they're about nothing, but they look at it like, well, for instance, like you said with the athletes, they get caught up with the women. But the reason is like they get caught up with multiple women. So if they go for the dude that's ugly, that's broke, and don't got nothing for him, won't nobody else want him. So hopefully I have somebody I can hold on to and stick with. And now that became the new standard.
Well, no, but there are some folks that...
It became your style.
The style, the style.
Dating a bum.
Right. Won't nobody take my bum. That's how they look at it.
Bum or desperation.
Right, exactly.
Desperation. I don't have to have all the man. Just give me a piece of man.
Because, like,
and that's enough.
They didn't grow up with
right, that's what I'm getting at.
Share and all that. Right. They didn't grow up with a real one to teach them that you do want to go up. You do want that upgrade. So they're like, well, look, if I can just get one,
Right.
That's all be all right. It'll all work out.
That's what I'm saying. As long as he's male,
Right.
it's all right. But it doesn't matter what type of male he is if he's not the worst of them all, right?
Even if he was not
They'll go for the worst.
Look, you don't even have to be an original.
But I think we got it. Y'all got it. You see, now, what we talked extensively about this because why? We see it every day. We see the mistakes everywhere. We may have even made the same mistakes. You know, it works both ways, right? The dads and the mothers need to sit down and tell a young man what type of woman to look for too, right? Because every woman out there ain't good. See, y'all quiet now. We're dogging the boys. Dogging them a minute ago. But every woman ain't good either, right? All right, if y'all want me to name some names, Eve, Delilah, those 1,000 women that Solomon had, and they wasn't good women because they did what? They changed him, right? And they pulled him away from God, right? And so obviously then it works both ways. Yes, sir.
You know, in today's time too, you know, a lot of these women, they're plotting and scheming. They're looking down the timeline, you know, the next few years. You know, you have some of these women that, you know, they might try to get with somebody in college, that they got a star athlete or something, they're trying to, you know, hook up with that guy, and they'll do it just for the purpose of trying to get pregnant. So that way, when they become rich and famous, they can say, well, you know.
Well, y'all done went adult for real. Go ahead.
You know, but you know, they say we got a child. You know, now you got to pay me child support, and the child support is an astronomical figure. You know, I remember a few years ago, he did it was getting sued by one of his baby mamas by the other baby mama, and she was saying, you know, the payment is so unequal. One child was getting $5,000 a month, the other one getting $45,000. And so they're like, we need to make this thing equal. You know, how come my child gets less?
But you know, that's the way it goes. The first child always gets more. The first one, they put them up. And then as it go down, those kids get less and less.
Well, that's less disposable income.
The first one was getting 5 and the second one was
Well,
getting
they waited too late. That means the other one went first.
But should we even have that conversation? This shouldn't even be a conversation, should it?
It is.
Because people not doing the right thing. Now we got all this confusion. Which child taken care of? Which one get the most? This, that, and the other. God never intended none of that stuff. That all had to come from Satan. Y'all get where I'm coming from when I say that. I'm not getting smart with you. But you see the confusion. God is not the author of confusion, is he?
That's right.
So it had to have come from the devil. But even in his example, when you see about the men getting set up with children, right? Women getting pregnant by them on purpose, right? That fits Proverbs 29 verse 3, right? Because what does it say? He that keepeth company with harlots. Did he just describe a harlot? Remember I told you, I know this is hard for you to say. Some women are prostitutes without being on the street. Oh, okay. Now you get it from his example, what I meant by that statement, right? But he that keepeth company with what? Harlots does what? Spendeth his substance, right? Is that child support? That's his what? Substance, right? All of that kind of stuff. Because why? He kept company with the wrong type of women. Okay? You see the word of God come alive, right? It's come alive right in front of our eyes. Let me move on. Just get one more in here. I think we'll probably end here on this note, and we'll continue on the prodigal son. But you see how deep this is, right? You see how deep the word of God is and how helpful it is for us not to fall into these traps. So obviously then you talked about it, right? When they go without guidance into the world, they pick the wrong people, right? Evil companionship, right? You know the scripture, 1 Corinthians 15:33. I like to use the New King James Version because it's more contemporary to how we actually speak today. But somebody go ahead and read that for me, please.
Do not deceive, evil communication corrupts good manners.
Do not be deceived. Evil company corrupts good habits. Have you ever seen that happen? Give me an example. Anybody got an example? How has that happened? Have you seen that happen? What has happened in some things that you've seen? Have you seen some cases of that? Yes.
when I was younger, we had a youth minister, and he took it, and there was a group of us of like maybe 15 or so. He took us everywhere, Six Flags, all over the place, and different things. But he was married, and the woman wasn't a member, and she was always after him about spending time with her, especially on Sundays, and more that she would, talk to him about it. He just eventually left the church. But I don't know what happened to him to this day, really, but he left the church.
So the best habit that she mentioned was what? Loving Christ. And the man got pulled away from loving Christ because he married the wrong woman, right? That actually became what I call like a spiritual boat anchor or dead weight, right? That actually pulled him away from Christ, right? And so obviously God's word is always right? Do not be deceived. You're not that smart. None of us are that smart, right? Evil company eventually is going to do what? Corrupt good habits, right? I think, was it King James say, was it good manners or something like that, similar to that? But it's the same thing, good habits, right? Go ahead, I think you got an example back there.
The most simple example of that is every childhood actor just about that came through, they all done started off decent, especially the ones on Disney, decent children, trying to do habits of humanity, all that good stuff. Then they hit 16, and all of a sudden, Olsen twins, and Amanda, whatever her name was, that girl, all of them, they done craziness. They started off decent people, was going to go somewhere with it, and got to the adulthood, teenage stage, and now they are doing foolery.
And you probably have seen some of the best athletes from your neighborhood. Where I'm from, there's a ton of playground legends. But obviously they want to be cool, right? They want to be accepted by everybody else, so they wouldn't get their books, right? So they got kicked off the team. That some of them became drug addicts and drug dealers and all that kind of stuff. And so what? They lived a life of crime and all kind of things. They messed themselves up, but they were actually what? Guys with great potential. You've probably seen that in academics, right? Especially some of the young men and ladies from our community, they do good up until about the 8th grade. But then high school come, it's like it's no longer cool to get good grades, right? No longer cool to go to school. They hanging out smoking behind the building and all kind of craziness, right? That completely changes their personality, right? They're skipping school. They're doing everything that you wouldn't think they would do. Because why? They under the influence of somebody they trying to impress, right? And so what did that evil company do? It corrupted what? Their good habits. It's happened. I know it's a fictional story. Actually, they're based on true stories. Like, you watch stuff like For My Man and all that kind of stuff. A lot of them women, once they end up with them guys, they end up doing life sentences because he done twisted their mind. Her minds all the way up to the point that they murder their parents sometime and do all kind of stuff just for that man's attention, right? What's the problem? It's fulfilling 1 Corinthians 15:33, right? What? Evil company corrupts good habits. What's so interesting about that story is they always show about how that person was on the right track. Someone were in nursing school and, doing well on their job. And all of a sudden they went to a bar. First mistake, anyway. They met some slick Willie there, right? And he just turned her mind completely around. And some of the saddest part about them is that a lot of them women are single mothers. And so now what? They locked up for life and they can't even see their kids. Because what? For my man. Okay. But any questions or comments? Feel free. Yes, sir.
I was going to say, too, Bruno, I can relate to this scripture and the last one. Because, when I was in college, all my friends, they always considered me to be the goody two-shoes guy.
Me too.
No matter what we did, I was going to go to church. It didn't matter if we had a game when we didn't get back till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I was going to make sure I made it to church. And, they always knew me as that. I was the guy that wasn't going to drink, wasn't going to smoke. I was going to do what was right. And, I had a couple of friends that I didn't really know really looked up to me as far as what the moral standard was. But, like, when I got to be, I guess maybe about 22, 23, I started getting into the wild street. Because I started getting some money, you know.
Oh, you're a prodigal son.
You know, you start getting paid, you know, things change. And I started spending a little bit of time in the gentleman's lounge, and I had taken one of my friends with me, and you know, both of us, we had never, you know, experienced anything like that, but shoot, we introduced him to it, and he just went totally on, you know, past where we were. And he was looking at me for the example. I didn't realize I had been the evil company in that, you know, but, you know, at a certain point, I'm like, hey man, you know, he was giving me calls, and, you know, he was at places where we had never been, and, you know, he had just gone off on his own. I was like, man, you done went too far, you know. And so, you know, we dialed, you know, we had to dial back, you know, and I had to tell him, hey man, you know, I'm wrong for this. You know, so don't follow me. You know, I'm changing. This ain't going up no more. You know, it was becoming too expensive. You know, for one thing. You know.
So
but besides it being wrong, you know, and so you know,
Well, meant to cover your
yeah, Daddy's in the audience if you don't know that. Right.
But you know, that's when you're younger, and you know, as you grow and mature, you know, you tell folks, hey, you know, I've been there, done that, ain't gonna never go there no more. You know, that's it, you know. And so, and luckily I was able to bring him back to, you know, doing right.
Yeah. Go ahead, sis. Then you.
Well, no, why is it so hard for us to, okay, if you got friends that are doing this stuff, you see them get in trouble, this stuff leave them astray. Why is it so hard to learn from other people's mistakes? Why you gotta get out there and make these mistakes?
There's several reasons why. 1 Corinthians 15:33 shows you one of them. Do not be what? Deceived. Remember, most people that get in trouble, they'll say, well, I'm smarter than them. I'll find a way to get out of that. You know, I won't end up in jail, you know, just like they done. Even though they may have been doing it for 20 years and you're just not getting into it, say, I'm smarter than them. You know, that kind of thing, right? And so some of it is foolish pride. Right? What did God say? Right? I mean, God said the devil's tools are what? The lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the what? Pride of life. I'm smarter than most. That won't happen to me. So Satan, I say, yeah, Satan's sitting back saying, yeah, you think you're smart, right? And Satan is probably sitting back saying, I've been around here longer than you, boy. I've been deceiving folks since Adam and Eve. Go ahead and try me. And then what does he do? He turn you out, don't he? You end up doing it. I mean, I'm just being honest with you. I hate to use that kind of harsh language, but it's the truth. It's the truth. Yes, ma'am.
So what I think of prime example of that is that the members of the church, old church is boring, and they be led from their friend because they want to go to this church that's got music, praise dance, and whatever else. And there's no wrong with it. That they hang out with their friend, girl, we doing this, we do that. Come on, go this with me. I know, I'm like, I don't want to hear that next. I'm not going to hear it.
I'm laughing with you, that answer. Because if you can only see the thought that's in my mind. But anyway, in other words, I'm being kind of sarcastic. But, you know, part of the reason could be going to bubblegum churches. In other words, ain't no substance to them, right? They're not teaching anybody anything, right? As long as you go and get your praise on, you can go do whatever you want to do, right? So they ain't helping the cause anything, because why? They're no longer bringing morality into the world, right? And so that's part of it, right? You see, in other words, you don't have nowhere to run, right? Think about it. Some of the kids are in some bad shape. They don't get no wisdom at home, right? They can't even go to some churches, right, and get no wisdom there, right? They can't go out in the streets because there's no wisdom there, right? And so what do they end up being? They're being evil company everywhere they go until somebody like us will intervene, you know, and help them. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
I just think that you know, with this scripture, we should, you know, strive to look at that every day, because just even in the workplace, you know, you can be surrounded
Yeah, absolutely.
by a lot of evil company, and, you know, depending on who you work with and hang around with at work, we're at work 8-9 hours a day, some 12 hours a day, 10-12 hours a day. And, you know, you can get caught up in gossip, or some co-workers might be going to happy hour and they want you to go to happy hour, and, you know, all those different things. And so we have to be careful, you know, we're supposed to be in the world but not of the world, so we have to just be on a daily basis.
And that's smart you said that, because evil company can come in any form, anywhere, right? And so you've got to pick your friends wisely on your job, right? You know, wisely everywhere that you go. You know, that's why God tells us avoid even the appearance of evil, right? If it looked like it has the potential to be bad, stay away from it anyway. You know, be that cautious and that conservative in your life. That'll make you stronger as a child of God. That's proceeding with wisdom, right? Okay. We got to stop, y'all. Let's go ahead and have somebody give us a song really quickly here. Then we'll reconvene as one assembly, and then we'll go from there. Good class, and good job, everybody. We'll reconvene in just a moment. God bless you. We'll continue this on the next occasion as well.
Holy Spirit,
dwell with me, touch my eyes, that I might see